A lot of you have been asking me to give you a tour of my studio. So here we go with the 2023 studio tour. Let's get started. First things first, the brains of a studio, the computer. When they announced this beast, I knew right away it would be my next toy. I'm talking about the Mac Studio with the M1 Max chip, 1TB of storage and a whopping 64GB of RAM. It packs all the power I need, not just for my music projects, but also for my video editing stuff. Behind the computer, I've got two SSD drives hooked up. The first one houses all my sound libraries, like the Complete Collector's Edition from Native Instruments, for example. The other drive is where I keep all the projects I'm currently working on. Now let's move on to the sound interface. My first universal audio interface was the Apollo X6, which I bought back in 2020. But as I started adding more analog gear to my setup, I realized I needed more inputs and outputs to be able to use all that hardware at the same time without constantly printing tracks. With my current setup, I've got 16 channels of simultaneous inputs and outputs. And for processing with universal audio plugins, I've got an octa satellite. That is a total of 20 DSP chips with the three devices combined. So far, I haven't hit the processing limit in any of my mixing projects. Let me quickly tell you about the monitors. The Neumann KH120. Before switching to these monitors, I had the Yamaha NS7s for many years and I was pretty happy with them. Once I bought the Neumanns, I had both pairs running together, thinking I could use them to check the mix on both systems. But I ended up loving the Neumann so much that the poor Yamaha pair was left gathering dust. So I decided to sell them and stick with the Neumanns. I absolutely adore these monitors and the mixes translate really well on other systems too. Let's talk a little bit about software. My go-to DAW is Cubase. I've been using it for over 15 years and it's like my second home. I know where everything is and I don't have to think twice to find what I need. Plus, I've customized it over the years to fit my specific needs. No matter which DAW you choose, you can do so much more with a control surface. Now I know this is not for everyone, but I like using one. I don't use all the features, but I like having my faders in front of me. To control Cubase, I use the second generation Icon Pro, which gives me a total of 16 faders. It helps me mix faster and provides a more hands-on experience. I use it extensively and I couldn't be happier with this controller. Alright, before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the analog rack routing and the PATCHBAY, I just want to take a few seconds to express my gratitude to all of the folks who have subscribed in the past few weeks. I only started this channel less than a month ago and we've already surpassed 120 subscribers. Thank you so much. I've got a lot of exciting content planned for this channel, so if you're not subscribed yet, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the upcoming videos. Thanks a lot. Now let's talk about something really important. The mix bus chain. The mix bus chain is like the secret sauce that adds that extra punch and polish to your entire mix. Early in the mixing process, I engage this chain and mix through it. From one of the Apollo outputs, I go directly into the TubeTech SMC2B multiband compressor. This is my go-to compressor and I love it for its versatility. Sometimes, for example, I use it to tighten up the low end while letting the high frequencies breathe a bit more. Or vice versa, compress the mids a bit more and leave the lows a bit looser. It's an excellent tube compressor with an impeccable sound. After the compressor, I have the modern classic SSL Fusion, a mastering processor that offers various processes like saturation, compression, equalization, and stereo image adjustment. One of the things I love about it is the mid-side matrix in its insert point. Here I have the king of equalizers connected. the Manly Massive Passive. I have it set up to mid-side mode, and the entire mix passes through this bad boy, helping me add the final touch of color to the mix. I adore its sound and versatility, especially those smooth and creamy shelf filters that create a spectacular sound. The signal then goes back to the SSL Fusion and is captured once again by the Dangerous Music 80 Plus mastering converter. The quality of this converter is incredible, and it works great for capturing the entire mix. One of the things I love is that it offers the option to activate the transformer or leave the mix completely clean. I usually use the transformer because it gives the mix that final push, adding a layer of polish that sounds super tasty. An important thing to note is that each point in the chain is connected to the PATCHBAY, allowing me to interrupt the chain at any point and connect it to any other devices in the studio. The PATCHBAY provides me with the basic routing setup that I've already configured, but it also maintains flexibility for any modifications during the mix. As my main preamp, I use the Warm Audio W73, which is a recreation of the famous Neve 1073 and comes with its own equalizer. I used these pre's to track here at the studio, and each of these channels is connected to the PATCHBAY, meaning that during the mix, I can also send any channel or group and use these channel strips. Typically, I use them for important elements like the main vocal or, depending on the song, the kick or snare. Generally, any element that I consider important and want to make it stand out. And speaking of vocals, here's the ultimate combination of all time. A serious connection of an 1176 compressor and an LA2A. For this purpose, I have the Lean 2A and the Lean 76. I use them 99% of the time for the main vocals, but occasionally I may use them for other elements too. As you may know, a very commonly used technique for mixing is to pair up two 1176s and keep them always connected on a bus with the all buttons in mode activated. These compressors are used in parallel and act as a kind of a distortion box. Any element that needs some character and presence benefits from these pair of compressors configured in this way. I have two Lean 76s for this task, always connected from the Apollo to the PATCHBAY and back. And in my template, I always have this effects channel ready and waiting for signals that need that special treatment. I love the 1176s, but one of my all-time favorite compressors has to be the distressor. In the studio, I have two distressors set up, and I use them mostly for processing drums. Specifically, I have them set up in stereo as the final compressor on the drums and percussion bus. These compressors are incredibly versatile, and you can create a wide range of different sounds with them. In fact, if I had to choose just one compressor out of all the ones I have, it would be the distressors. Speaking of compressors, I have two more compressors on the list. The first one is the Heritage Audio 609A, which follows the principles of the Neve 33609, which is one of the most renowned compressors in the audio world. What do I use it for? Well, I haven't talked about my template yet, but I use a technique called multi-bus processing. This compressor is one that I use on one of these buses. I have it set in a specific way and I don't move it around. The other compressor is the Warm Audio Bus Comp, which is a design based on the famous SSL bus compressor. I don't have a specific use for this one. Sometimes I use it on the mix bus alongside the tube tech. Other times I use it on one of the instrument buses. And sometimes I use it on individual elements. It has its own connection with the Apollo and the PATCHBAY, and it's always ready to work. With this entire setup, I have a system that allows me to be creative during the mixing process. But here I want to say something very important. Having all the equipment in the world doesn't mean much if our productions aren't optimized for mixing. And that's what I call mixing before mixing. So here's a video I made about this topic, discussing how to think about the mix while working on the arrangement and composition. See you there.